You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 14th of February. 3 Middlesbrough men jailed for grooming underage girls for sex. Successful test flight for Taranis stealth drone. BBC propaganda, why I want a microchip implant. EU terrorises Switzerland over vote to limit immigration. Belgium, train announcement asks Jews to get off at Auschwitz. Austria, Red Cross doctor rejects blood donations from Muslims. Nick Griffin MEP on the Wythenshawe by-election. Homeland Security to purchase 141,000 rounds of sniper ammo. Fusion energy milestone reported by California scientists. Thought for the day, Sodom and gone tomorrow. And finally, a Valentine's special for you guys. UK news. 3 Middlesbrough men jailed for grooming underage girls for sex. 5 girls, all aged between 13 and 15, who were groomed on the streets of a northeast town, are still being tortured by supporters of the men who abused them, their families said tonight. The mother of one of the teenage victims spoke out after 2 men and a 17-year-old youth were jailed for a total of 19 years for sexually exploiting the girls in Middlesbrough. Judge John Walford sentenced Shakil Munir, aged 32, to 8 years, 19-year-old Saqib Ahmed to 8 years and Atiq Latif, 17, to 3 years in a young offenders institution. He added, in reality they were children who lacked the maturity of experience to cope with your manipulative ways. The court heard that the girls had been taunted and insulted by friends and family of the defendants since coming forward, including being bombarded by obscene messages, called sluts and accused of being racist. Judge Walford described the girls' treatment as appalling, adding it revealed a profoundly worrying attitude about the offending. Speaking outside court after the sentencing, the mother of one of the victims said, "The girls are still being tortured by these people. They are painting them as sluts when they are the victims." Christopher Knox, prosecuting, told Teesside Crown Court that the girls had been exploited by a loosely connected group of young men and one older man. World at 8. Loosely connected as in Muslim and community. Successful test flights for Taranis stealth drone. Taranis, the most advanced aircraft ever built by British engineers, surpassed all expectations during its first flight trials last year. Until now it's been shrouded in secrecy, but defence chiefs have provided a brief glimpse of Britain's top secret experimental stealth drone, declaring that it had surpassed all expectations during closely guarded test flights. The 185 million Taranis, named after the Celtic god of thunder, has been billed as the most technologically advanced aircraft ever built in the UK. Although its speed has not been disclosed, it is understood to be designed to be supersonic and capable of crossing continents. It's hoped that Taranis will lead to stealth jets and drones able to hit targets deep inside enemy territory while evading their defences. BBC propaganda, why I want a microchip implant. Would you like to have an RFID microchip implanted under your skin? If you're anything like me, you would never allow such a thing to be done. But many others, especially amongst the younger generations, see things very differently. RFID microchip implants and other forms of wearable technology are increasingly being viewed as cool, trendy and cutting edge by young people that wish to enhance themselves. And of course the mainstream media is all in favour of these technological advancements. For example, the BBC just published a piece entitled "Why I Want a Microchip Implant." We are rapidly entering a dystopian future in which it will be normal for technology to monitor our movements 24 hours a day. Most people will probably welcome this change, but it also opens up the door for an oppressive government to someday greatly abuse this technology. World at 8. Well, it is the youths the government want to control, especially in the New World Order. European news. EU terrorises Switzerland over vote to limit immigration. The European Union is terrorising voters in Switzerland and threatening retaliation against the tiny nation, which is not in the EU, after the Swiss voted on February the 9th to limit immigration in a national referendum. Amid outrageous verbal attacks on the Swiss themselves, Senior EU officials have been suggesting that xenophobia was behind the vote. Out-of-touch European politicians and bureaucrats are even warning that Switzerland could lose its current bilateral access to the common market, ruled by the emerging superstate in Brussels. The EU, famous for ignoring the public to impose its will, has already started adopting the consequences promised by its apparatchiks. According to news reports, the unaccountable regime just suspended talks with Switzerland on incorporating Swiss utilities into the broader European energy market. No technical negotiations on the electricity agreement are foreseen between Switzerland and the EU at the moment in light of the new situation. European Commission spokeswoman Pia Anne-Hilde Hansen announced to reporters at Brussels on February the 11th. More pain has been promised. World at 8. What was that about Hitler and Stalin? Even they were more honest in their approach to domination than this lot of scroats. Belgium. Train announcement asks Jews to get off at Auschwitz. Horrifying anti-Semitic announcement on Belgian train bears striking similarity to 2012 incidents. Perpetrators have not been caught. A Belgian train announced 2 weeks ago that Jewish passengers should get off at Auschwitz, according to Wallal, sparking complaints to local police. According to Luxembourg broadcast network RTL, the perpetrators, probably local teenagers playing an anti-Semitic prank, gained access to the speaker system at about 5 p.m. on a train from Namur to Brussels. One of them then announced in French, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching Auschwitz. All Jews are requested to disembark and take a short shower." World at 8. Bad taste. Very bad taste. Of course, no one even thinks it could be Muslim youth, do they? They loathe Jews and are open about it, and also they don't get the flack the neo-Nazis do for thinking the same way. Austria. Red Cross doctor rejects blood donations from Muslims. A doctor working for the Red Cross in the Austrian city of Linz has caused outrage by criticising a blood donation campaign by an Islamic charity, claiming that people who come from Muslim countries have bad blood. The IRG Foundation has been campaigning for Muslims to donate blood, but the Red Cross doctors claim that Muslims, or at the very least have hepatitis B, left charity worker Aysun Özdemir shocked. Özdemir personally spoke with the doctor over the phone on February the 5th, criticising the comments and informing the doctor that illnesses have got nothing to do with one's ethnic or religious background. Özdemir also told the doctor that the IRG Foundation is an Austrian-based foundation for Austrian Muslims and that she herself had been in Austria for 23 years since she was 2 years old, but the doctor reportedly ignored this. IRG Foundation chairman Murat Basa said that a similar campaign was run by the charity last year in Linz, and not only did it get Red Cross approval, but it also was published on the website. The director of the Red Cross in Linz, Christian Gabriel, said that it was no religious criteria for blood, with the only requirement being that the donor is healthy. However, Gabriel did add that while all are welcome to donate blood on an individual basis, the Red Cross has recently been distancing itself from accepting blood from charities, as in many cases bad blood has been turned away. World at 8. Good, it's too late once something has been passed to another person, isn't it? I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about the Wythenshawe by-election.
There's not much to report from the European Parliament this week. The papers contain the usual crop of stories about the impact of Brussels rule, notably the 60-mile-per-hour speed limits to be imposed on sections of the M3 in order to ensure that it complies with EU carbon emission targets. Then there is the as-yet undisclosed role of EU Green Socialist wilderness restoration dogma on the decision of the Environment Agency to stop dredging rivers, which has of course led to the flooding disaster that's led to such an upsurge in the sale of designer Wellingtons to politicians and journalists. I'm all for preserving our wildlife and the beauty of our countryside. Indeed, I've been passionate about it since I went sabotaging hedgerow-destroying bulldozers in Suffolk when I was barely in my teens. But the determination of leftist bureaucrats to degrade flood defences so that vast areas of our land, won from the sea and from boggy waste by the sweat and vision of generations of our ancestors, is not fundamentally a pro-nature crusade. Rather, it's an anti-human, specifically anti-Western agenda. They know that Africans couldn't do it, so they don't want us to do it either. They'd ideally like to send us all back to caves, because then we'd all be equal. I was speaking with a couple of UKIP activists in Wythenshawe yesterday, and I was pleasantly surprised to find that, for all the calculated PC cowardice and cynical opportunism of Nigel Farage, they understood a fair bit about what's really going on. Indeed, I was rather amused to be asked by one of them if I'd heard about Gramsci and about the Frankfurt School. As you probably already know, questions such as that are just one very small step from true dissident heresy, from speaking of things and naming names that may not be spoken of or named. Awareness of the real issues behind the headlines and about what's really involved in the long war against our civilization and our people is spreading further and faster than ever. The key driver of this, of course, is the Internet's rolling demolition of the system's monopoly on education / indoctrination and the undermining of the controlled media's dominance of information. A minor but increasingly significant factor in Britain is also an unintended consequence of the media's relentless promotion of the UKIP safety valve. The left, particularly the BBC, are doing it in order to block us and to split the Tory vote. The super rich are doing it in the hope of pushing back the EU's drive to monitor and restrict their greed, and the neocons and Zionists are doing it as part of their effort throughout the entire West to create a house-trained nationalism that will act as a safety valve to prevent real radical change coming about when their banking swindle and corporate looting gravy train comes off the rails completely. Having such a powerfully promoted rival for the protest vote in our way is, of course, a tough experience for us. But in order for the trick to work, the media mindbenders are having to push it so hard that it's waking people up. Not all of them, and not very much, but UKIP is at present recruiting perhaps 1,000 new members a month. Some are, of course, former Tories, most of whom are totally unassimilable into a social nationalist movement. But many others are entirely new to politics. And just because joining UKIP is their first step into politics, it doesn't mean it will also be their last. Many will move on towards us. In the long run, UKIP will be seen as the thing that will have been the first step on an escalator of nationalist radicalisation for a new generation of activists. To mix metaphors, we need to work on ways to make UKIP less of an electoral rival and more of a big pond in which to go fishing for new recruits. Some of UKIP's new crop will come into their party and pass through it as they learn about Farage's failings and about the many things that UKIP don't even talk about. We are already recruiting the first trickle of individuals in this category, and there will be more reaching us at the top of the escalator in the months and years ahead. Others will stay with UKIP, only to discover that UKIP doesn't stay with them, because it's inevitable that Farage and his ruling clique will at some point do a deal with the Tories which will involve killing UKIP stone dead overnight in exchange for a promise of cabinet seats. Many other activists will of course refuse to accept such a betrayal of all their hard work and hopes, but these dissidents will promptly split over the question of what to do about it and who to follow out of the wilderness into which Farage will lead them. And that, my friends, will be our time. A time we must work to hasten by finding and funding ways to inject genuinely radical national revolutionary ideas into UKIP's mushrooming body. There's no prospect of trying to repeat what Militant nearly did with the Labour Party, because in that case Labour and its Trotskyite parasites were at root already the same, and because the operation predated the Internet, and the ease with which the political and personal history of almost any would-be mole could be uncovered in minutes. So there's no point trying to get committed people to join UKIP and change it from within. But ideological entryism is vital if we're to ensure that, when UKIP is folded up by its ruling clique, its rank-and-file fruit drops ripe into our hands, rather than falling off and rotting. But enough of them, what about us? We ran a really good campaign in Wythenshawe, well-funded and sophisticated. It was organisationally light years ahead of the by-elections we fought between 2006 and 2009, in which we terrified the old parties. But the combination of the UKIP hype, growing voter apathy, remember that 72% of them voted for nobody, and the Labour Party's mastery of the postal vote and exploitation of working class fears of Tory cuts, means that electioneering is, for us at present, hard pounding. But we can, must and will keep on pounding, because it keeps us in the minds even of those who at present don't vote, because they're sick of all politics, because they believe that all are the same. The pathetic whining of defeated nationalists in their alphabet soup of do-nothing drinking clubs, and the carping negativity of searchlight moles such as Peter Rushton, all deliberately miss the point. We are not a toxic brand. Everyone who spent time with Eddie O'Sullivan and our team in Wythenshawe over the last few weeks will tell you the same. We're getting as good a response as ever, if not better. People want to talk to us. They want to shake our hands. They want their pictures taken with me. They love our leaflets and they love our papers. They love us. But then they go and vote UKIP because they think it's an even better way to get their own back on the Westminster gang, or they don't vote at all because they don't believe it will make a difference. Which, of course, is not a sign of stupidity or uselessness, as alleged by the defeated cowards who harbour fantasies of withdrawing to some pitiful and unnatural white nationalist commune in the hills, encouraging as they do so a totally un-nationalist contempt for our people, and withdraw from the fundamental nationalist ideas of love and sacrifice for our motherland. Let's face it, the conclusion that voting changes nothing, that the elite are in it for themselves, and that UKIP will change nothing, a conclusion nearly reached by, when you take into account the significant minority not even registered to vote, over 3/4 of the population, is not stupid. It's all too accurate and realistic. The only problem is that they view voting for us in the same light. That's what we've got to change. The only question is how. It's not what's wrong with the people, it's what's wrong with us. Actually, in large measure, we already know what we've got to do. In fact, in many ways, we're beginning it. We've already begun it, but we've got to step it up. Let's look at these point by point. 1. We have to keep improving our election fighting machine and experience, ready for the day when Farage slits UKIP's throat and overnight opens up our path again to the active support of the 1/3 of the voting 25% who are already prepared to vote against the system. In that regard, Wythenshawe was a further big step forward for us. Using, as we did, address mailings to hit the majority of houses with several different leaflets at several different times in the campaign, something we achieved more effectively than any other party in Wythenshawe, was a massive learning curve for us. So now we know how to do it. If we'd acquired this capability 7 or 8 years ago, our results in those days before the BBC pushed through UKIP through the roof would have been literally stunning. Still, better late than never, and when the wheel of external fortune turns again, we will be far better equipped. 2. The postal vote is king. 48% of all the votes cast in yesterday's contest were sent in by post. And while we hit them with perfect timing, many of the current crop are hardcore Labourites, which is why Labour registered them to vote in the first place. Unfortunately, the Wythenshawe election was called with such short notice that we made the decision not to invest time to harvest our own. Even if we had decided otherwise, we wouldn't have had time to get many. But even a couple of days at the start of the campaign, getting people signed up instead of just shaking their paws, would have meant that we'd have overcome the Green vote out of the huge Manchester College campus in the constituency. This all adds to the urgency of our planned Operation White Vote, something which must not be a short-term publicity stunt, but it must become one of our organisational and operational foundations from now on. Let's be blunt about this. While UKIP are riding as high as they are, there is no chance of any nationalist of any description winning any normal election. This isn't about BNP electability. Even if one of the pathetic alphabet soup grouplets manages to bestir itself to stand a handful of candidates, they will be obliterated by UKIP because they don't even have our recognition, let alone our experience, organisational sophistication or activist manpower. But these three things, put together with a permanent, relentless, gruelling postal vote drive in our target areas, will see us win again. All that it needs is a little local team of serious activists who understand that times have changed radically since the days in 2003 and 4, when a single leaflet through each door and a brave eccentric with a sandwich board were enough to win seats. From now on, you work and work and work and eventually win, or join the fools who whine and whine and whine and lose forever. That's the choice. 3. The old parties have done such a shocking demolition job on the collective credibility of all politics that we can't convince people that we're different simply by claiming to be different. They've been bitten far too many times to believe it. Rather, we have to show them we're different, and we have to prove to them that we're different by actions instead of words. And I'll tell you now, free, gratis and for nothing, that we won't be able to do that by holding moaning sessions like those who've given up the fight, given up on the cause and given up on our people. We won't do it by navel-gazing. We will do it with community action, with ward food banks, and by regarding the signing up of a single postal vote as a very good result for a day's work. Day after day, week after week, and year after year. Because there are no shortcuts. Ours is a long road, which means that we have to recruit fresh blood, new committed idealists to walk that road with us and to replace the casualties who will inevitably drop out on the way. This is our key challenge. To an extent, we already know the answer here too. It's very simple. BNP activism recruits BNP activists. Militant, noisy, confident, well-equipped demonstrations recruit militant idealists, individuals who need a home and a great cause. Attending waffle shop unity meetings with little groups of self-obsessed cranks and has-beens doesn't. We've recruited new activists in Wythenshawe, and will recruit new activists in the many times bigger European election campaign in May. The millions of leaflets we put out and the election broadcasts we will show must in most areas be focused on recruitment and our long-term struggle, rather than directly about votes. To win and hold the minds of those activists, we must step up our ideological training so that they understand that we're not a poor man's version of the elite's UKIP contrick. For this, and for the ideological, to win and hold the minds of those activists, we need to step up our ideological training so that they understand that we're not a poor man's version of the elite's UKIP contrick. For this, and to gird and armour their hearts so that they can stay the distance of our long march, we must make our party something much, much more than just a slick political machine. It must also be a family, looking after our own people, giving them a sense of true belonging in an atomised, alienated, lonely, screwed up wreck of society. So we need a big emphasis on social occasions. We need to learn songs and teach them to newcomers. We need to hold more social events and to understand that they're not just about fundraising, they're about movement building. They're not just physical gatherings, they're about bringing our people together, not just in body, but in mind, heart and spirit. Because together we can build. Together we will overcome. Together we will win. Because our time will come.
Thank you very much, Nick, and a happy Valentine's Day to you and yours. World News. Homeland Security to purchase 141,000 rounds of sniper ammo. The Department of Homeland Security is buying more bullets with a solicitation for over 141,000 rounds of sniper ammunition. What makes the .308 ammunition so deadly is the long-range capability of the round, notes James Smith. The ability is called ballistic coefficient, or the efficiency of a projectile in overcoming air resistance as it travels to its target. According to Spear Reloading Manual No. 13, the .308 165 grain has the highest coefficient of any hunting rifle. The latest purchase further illustrates the fallacy of the DHS excuse that it is buying bullets in bulk in order to save money. The federal agency will pay around $1.20 for each round, when a lower grain round could be acquired for around a quarter of the price. The DHS have faced questions over the last couple of years as to the purpose of its mass ammo purchases, which have totalled over 2 billion bullets, with some fearing the federal agency is gearing up for civil unrest. Fusion energy milestone reported by California scientists. Scientists are creeping closer to their goal of creating a controlled fusion energy reaction by mimicking the interior of the sun inside the hardware of a laboratory. In the latest incremental advance reported Wednesday online in the journal Nature, scientists in California used 192 lasers to compress a pellet of fuel and generate a reaction in which more energy came out of the fuel core than went into it. There's still a long way to go before anyone has a functioning fusion reactor, something physicists have dreamed of since Albert Einstein was alive. A fusion reactor would run on a common form of hydrogen found in seawater. It would emit minimal nuclear waste and couldn't have the kind of meltdown that can occur in a traditional nuclear fission reactor. Scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, home of the multi-billion-dollar National Ignition Facility, took pains to calibrate their claims of success. This was not fusion ignition but the NIF's ultimate ambition. The experiment overall requires much more energy on the front end, all those laser shots, than comes out the back end. Another fusion energy strategy developed at the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory in New Jersey and more widely used by researchers worldwide uses giant magnets to confine the hot plasma in which the fusion reactions occur. Stuart Prager, director of the Princeton Laboratory, applauded the new results reported in Nature by the California team, saying, "It's the first sign that they're getting what we call self-heating." World at 8, I've always backed fusion energy. Wonderful news. Thought for the day: Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, those were the days, or were they? If you look at what is printed and published in our nationals, you'd be right in thinking that Western civilization relies totally on the young and their propensity to kill themselves in as public a way as possible. Scantily clad girls feature most heavily, of course, because it sells papers, but lads are doing the same, but by doing something online which I haven't yet figured out. How can an invisible person get someone to drink themselves to death and take a picture at the same time? I know I'm not up to date with techie matters, but it does seem that parent replacement has taken place in the land of the machines, if not that we have children enacting sexual and torture scenes from a sodding Xbox game. You go figure the amount of publicity given to the stupids of this country, and then you'll understand it is all a smokescreen, whereas the true future problem of the UK is being well ignored in the parlance of the Utes. If you publish enough pictures of booze-soaked youngsters, then most youngsters will want to emulate it. Well, at least the white ones will. Whatever their backgrounds or schooling, it just makes for a better class of booze and perhaps a nicer place to get stewed in. It's all the same. A national programming of our young to do exactly what they want, and if they don't know then they will be told by their computers or their mobiles, seems like a good life to me. Not. And all the while Islam is creeping round this country like insidious Japanese knotweed, almost impossible to get rid of once planted. This isn't a racist rant, because Islam is multicoloured if not multi-sect. The only enemy to Islam is a person or a country which is not, at present, Islamic. Looking at the lovely decrepit houses in London that used to be wonderful homes to the old moneyed rich, one can see the respect that foreigners have for us and our land, and that is virtually nil. Most of these ignored and sad places have been bought without even sight of and through offshore banks for mainly Asians, both Muslim and Hindu, Russians and other mega-rich remnants of humanity, not to improve them or even live in them, but to make money when and if land or property goes up even more. It is a reflection not only of their homelands, which looks worse than these houses most of the time, but a mirror of how they view England. It is worse than strip mining, and although evident with these previously beautiful residences which have been published, we have the same problem in the council houses and middle-income streets in this country. Very few of our Muslim immigrants especially raise the standards of the streets or estates where they reside, and I mean black, white or brown ones. Muslims, that is. In a very interesting article by Y.K. Cherson on Muslims and their impact on Great Britain, which I have read with interest, apart from the fact that we should have had nil immigration from Arab or African countries for the last half a century, we as a people have proved overly generous to these parasitical strangers. As Cherson says, some 3 years ago ex-Great Britain recognised Islamic polygamous marriages. Oh, how tolerant we in Great Britain are. After having admired their own generosity, tolerance and devotion to democracy, the British started to calculate the costs. The results were disastrous. Muslim immigrants wished to enjoy a happy marital life with 4 wives cost British taxpayers £5 million every year. And that is not all. The figure was calculated on 2007 statistics, keeping in mind the dramatic increase of the number of Muslim immigrants to Great Britain in the last 6 years, when over 500,000 of only legal Muslim immigrants arrived to this unfortunate immigration-hit country every year. The costs are now much higher. In general, the top 5 immigrant groups ranked by benefits dependency in ex-Great Britain are Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Turks, Somalis and Persians, all Muslims. And of the total number of Muslim immigrants living in Britain, more than 50% are economically inactive. Recent 2012 reports claim this number to have escalated to almost 85%. In 2012, 75% of all Muslim women and 50% of all Muslim men were unemployed. And that is not the entire picture. Muslims claim disability more than any other group, including British natives. 24% of female and 21% of male Muslim immigrants in Britain claim a disability. In monetary terms, it means that out of 5 million Muslims living in Britain, according to 2012 statistics, 4.25 million Muslims, or 85%, are living off taxpayers. A minimum benefit payment in Britain is £67 a week, which multiplied by 4.25 million will give us an astronomical figure of £284,750,000 per week, or 1.1 billion per month, which are paid from the pockets of the British taxpayers, who by the opinion of their government must feed, care, teach and kiss Muslims and their numerous children good night. But even this is not the end of the story, because this exorbitant sum does not include housing benefits, medical care and other rights utilised by the population. If we include them, then with housing, child subsidies and healthcare, Muslims cost the British taxpayers at least £18 billion a year. Instead of informing the native Brits about how they might tighten their belts, all the British government has to do is to lighten the burden on the public budget, is to reduce the 85% inactive Muslim population. Muslims constitute only 5% of the population in Denmark, but they consume 40% of the Danish welfare budget. The Swedish statistics on welfare recipients correlate quite well with the similar statistics from Denmark and Britain. On average, 60 to 70% of the entire nation's welfare payouts in Sweden go to Muslims, who make up only 5% of the total population. Such alarming numbers are common for all European countries, and it's not because Muslim immigrants cannot find a job. Quite often it's a conscious policy. Some years back, a Sunday Times reporter spent 2 months as a recruit in a Muslim group called Saviour Sect. The Saviour Sect was established 10 months ago when its predecessor group Al-Mujahirun was disbanded after coming under close scrutiny by the authorities. Its members meet in secret in halls, followers' homes and parks. They are so opposed to the British state that they see it as their duty to make no economic contribution to the nation. One member warned our undercover reporter against getting a job because it would be contributing to the kuffar, non-Muslim system. Instead, the young follower Nasser, who receives £44 a week job seekers allowance, said it was permissible to live off benefits, just as the Prophet Muhammad had lived off the state while attacking it at the same time. Even paying car insurance was seen as supporting the system. All the Saviour Sect brothers drive without insurance, he said. So, with all these facts, are you still happy to virtually support Muslim immigrants? You will note that you don't see very much published unless it's a white benefits cheater with a borderline retarded family, and then they occupy most of the spaces in the paper that the drunken Utes would. In fact, all to denigrate the indigenous peoples of the UK. But this immigration problem relating to mainly Muslims is growing every day, unchecked and unmonitored, in Europe as well as the UK. We are all broke, that is a fact. And the recession, although hailed as over by our government liars, is not yet over by any means. Which is why all the mega rich who bought these huge properties are not living in them. The rich do not live alongside the poor. Another valid point by Cherson is that Europe is experiencing astronomical levels of debt, and it is widely known that deep cuts are needed. The recent recession in 2007 contributed to the problem. However, it was not some Great Depression. It would be logical to ask why on earth Europe has not been able to bounce back. There is one very obvious drain on the economy, and that is immigration. Muslim immigration in particular throughout Europe and the rest of the West hinders recovery, and the stats prove it. But try to say it in the mainstream media, and even if you succeed, which is highly unlikely, because the theme of Muslim immigration is taboo in the left-wing media, prepare to be called an Islamophobe, racist, retrograde, enemy to progress and peace, fascist and a Nazi. And also get ready for an avalanche of lawsuits. So while we are paying out for Islam, allowing thousands more in, allowing unlimited breeding and the draining of our resources, Muslims hate us and want to create their fatherlands in the UK and Europe. When a Muslim is nice, polite, taking a few drinks, he is playing a game. It is mentioned in the Quran that to fool the unbeliever you have to make him believe he is accepted. Having read up some of the Quran, I believe the word is takfir. This means getting to high places in an establishment or the armed forces, local councils and even MPs. Getting a knighthood is a real whammy. Actors and actresses, reporters and presenters, all have taken over the sound waves and TV, and the vast majority are Muslim. Our schools are mainly Muslim children, as are our universities. Their birth rate is treble ours, and our governments do nothing to promote white birth rates at all, in their discouraging way of demoting our religion, family life, and the pace of life that, although not perfect, we in the UK enjoyed in the 1960s, that of the hatched, matched and dispatched. Not everything was perfect, of course, before immigration, but it certainly was not as bad as it's going to be for us white Christians, and the folly is that although many can see it, not a lot will action. The message from Muslims is Muslims will conquer and rule Europe. That is the message from many prominent figures. Egyptian cleric Salam Abu el-Fatuh recently said exactly the same, that Muslims will soon conquer Rome. Hamas MP and cleric Yunus al-Astal, Muslims will conquer Rome, Islam will rule the world. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdi al-Rahman al-Arifi, imam of the mosque of the Saudi government's King Fahd Defence Academy, wrote, "We will control the land of the Vatican, we will control Rome and introduce Islam in it." Quite coincidentally, of course, it was the Saudis who have gifted trillions of petrodollars since the 70s to build mosques all over the world. The biggest in Europe is in Rome, next to the Vatican, holding over 30,000 people. Let's not forget that according to Mohammed, mosques are none other than military outposts, footholds in the enemy's land of infidels, or in other words, us, according to Cherson, and he is right. If we are foolish enough to comply, allow our own youth to do what they are told by strangers on machines, permit abortions mainly for white girls, make our young women ill with pills preventing pregnancies usually obtained when drunk, taking away any form of decent work for our young men, and take away national pride, and replace it with a multicultural mishmash of emotions, and the Muslims don't have very much to do to take over, do they? The desecration of our buildings is just the tip of the iceberg. The calls of what will come. It is the message of Islam. Sodom and gone tomorrow, and they mean us. And finally, a Valentine's special for guys. In a Chicago hospital, a gentleman had made several attempts to get into the men's restroom, but it had always been occupied. A nurse noticed his predicament. "Sir," she said, "you may use the ladies' room if you promise not to touch any of the buttons on the wall." He did what he needed to, and as he sat there he noticed the buttons he'd been promised not to touch. Each button was identified by letters WW, WA, PP and a red one labelled ATR. Who would know if he touched them? He couldn't resist. He pushed WW. Warm water was sprayed gently upon his bottom. What a nice feeling, he thought. Men's restrooms don't have nice things like this. Anticipating greater pleasure, he pushed the WA button. Warm air replaced the warm water, gently drying his underside. When this stopped, he pushed the PP button. A large powder puff caressed his bottom, adding a fragile scent of spring flowers to this unbelievable pleasure. The ladies' restroom was more than a restroom. Its tender, loving pleasure. When the powder puff completed its pleasure, he couldn't wait to push the ATR button, which he knew would be supreme ecstasy. Next thing he knew, he opened his eyes. He was in a hospital bed, and a nurse was staring down at him. "What happened?" he exclaimed. "The last thing I remember was pushing the ATR button." "The button ATR is an automatic tampon remover. Your penis is under your pillow." Which shows men never listen, or rather listen, but do not obey. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy Valentine's Day and a very dry and safe weekend. to be done. But many others, especially amongst the younger generations, see things very differently. RFID microchip implants and other forms of wearable technology are increasingly being viewed as cool, trendy and cutting edge by young people that wish to enhance themselves. And of course the mainstream media is all in favour of these technological advancements. For example, the BBC just published a piece entitled "Why I Want a Microchip Implant." We are rapidly entering a dystopian future in which it will be normal for technology to monitor our movements 24 hours a day. Most people will probably welcome this change, but it also opens up the door for an oppressive government to someday greatly abuse this technology. World at 8. Well, it is the youths the government want to control, especially in the New World Order. European news. EU terrorises Switzerland over vote to limit immigration. The European Union is terrorising voters in Switzerland and threatening retaliation against the tiny nation, which is not in the EU, after the Swiss voted on February the 9th to limit immigration in a national referendum. Amid outrageous verbal attacks on the Swiss themselves, senior EU officials have been suggesting that xenophobia was behind the vote. Out-of-touch European politicians and bureaucrats are even warning that Switzerland could lose its current bilateral access to the common market ruled by the emerging superstate in Brussels. The EU, famous for ignoring the public to impose its will, has already started adopting the consequences promised by its apparatchiks. According to news reports, the unaccountable regime just suspended talks with Switzerland on incorporating Swiss utilities into the broader European energy market. No technical negotiations on the electricity agreement are foreseen between Switzerland and the EU at the moment in light of the new situation, European Commission spokeswoman Pia Anne-Hilde Hansen announced to reporters at Brussels on February the 11th. More pain has been promised. World at 8. What was that about Hitler and Stalin? Even they were more honest in their approach to domination than this lot of scroats. Belgium. Train announcement asks Jews to get off at Auschwitz. Horrifying anti-Semitic announcement on Belgian train bears striking similarity to 2012 incidents. Perpetrators told Teesside Crown Court that the girls had been exploited by a loosely connected group of young men and one older man. World at 8. Loosely connected as in Muslim and community. Successful test flights for Taranis stealth drone. Taranis, the most advanced aircraft ever built by British engineers, surpassed all expectations during its first flight trials last year. Until now it's been shrouded in secrecy, but defence chiefs have provided a brief glimpse of Britain's top secret experimental stealth drone, declaring that it had surpassed all expectations during closely guarded test flights. The 185 million Taranis, named after the Celtic god of thunder, has been billed as the most technologically advanced aircraft ever built in the UK. Although its speed has not been disclosed, it is understood to be designed to be supersonic and capable of crossing continents. It's hoped that Taranis will lead to stealth jets and drones able to hit targets deep inside enemy territory while evading their defences. BBC propaganda. Why I want a microchip implant. Would you like to have an RFID microchip implanted under your skin? If you're anything like me, you would never allow such a thing. UK news. 3 Middlesbrough men jailed for grooming underage girls for sex. 5 girls, all aged between 13 and 15, who were groomed on the streets of a northeast town, are still being tortured by supporters of the men who abused them, their families said tonight. The mother of one of the teenage victims spoke out after 2 men and a 17-year-old youth were jailed for a total of 19 years for sexually exploiting the girls in Middlesbrough. Judge John Walford sentenced Shakil Munir, aged 32, to 8 years, 19-year-old Saqib Ahmed to 8 years and Atiq Latif, 17, to 3 years in a young offenders institution. He added, in reality they were children who lacked the maturity of experience to cope with your manipulative ways. The court heard that the girls had been taunted and insulted by friends and family of the defendants since coming forward, including being bombarded by obscene messages, called sluts and accused of being racist. Judge Walford described the girls' treatment as appalling, adding it revealed a profoundly worrying attitude about the offending. Speaking outside court after the sentencing, the mother of one of the victims said, The girls are still being tortured by these people. They're painting them as sluts when they are the victims. Christopher Knox prosecuting.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 14th of February. 3 Middlesbrough men jail for grooming underage girls for sex. Successful test flight for Tehran's stealth drone. BBC propaganda, why I want a microchip implant. EU terrorises Switzerland over vote to limit immigration. Belgium, train announcement asks Jews to get off at Auschwitz. Austria, Red Cross doctor rejects blood donations from Muslims. Nick Griffin MEP on the Wythenshawe by-election. Homeland Security to purchase 141,000 rounds of sniper ammo. Fusion energy milestone reported by California scientists. Thought for the day, Sodom and gone tomorrow. And finally, a Valentine's special for you guys.